Good morning. It's a Moment in the Word Monday, and I'm back with you again. We're ready to start a new week and see new mercies from the Lord and to see all that He has for us this week. And in reading the scriptures this morning, I was in a book that the story may be familiar to some and not familiar to others, but I'm picking up the scriptures that I'm about to read at the point of crisis in this story. And I'll try to catch you up briefly so that you'll know what's going on. But in the book of Esther, the 4th chapter, I'm going to read a few verses starting at the 10th verse. And it says, "Again Esther spake unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Wow. This is a point of crisis in this story for the Jewish people, because Esther, whose name was originally Hadassah before she became the queen under King Ahasuerus, and for you all don't know the story very quickly, there was a queen named Vashti, and Ahasuerus the king gave a big banquet because he was planning a military strategy to go against, to enlarge his kingdom and go against some enemies. But he invited other kings and princes to a big banquet to try to form an alliance so that they would be with him. And he just treated everybody so royally. I mean, told them that, gave them each servants whatever they wanted, they could have it. He showed all of his riches, showed them the kingdom so that they would know that he was, more than financially able to underwrite or fund this war that he was about to go into. And so Vashti, being this beautiful queen, at the end of this, about 7 days or so, a period that he held this big banquet for everybody. And in fact, I know it was more than 7 days, may have been almost a month. But anyway, after doing this and exposing everybody to the kingdom, he wanted them to see his wife, the queen, who was supposedly, according to scripture, so beautiful, so gorgeous. And he was really just showing off and, prompting. He wanted her to come and have all the men see, all that he had. It wasn't enough that he showed him the palace and his riches and his jewels and everything else that he had, but he wanted to say, I've got the baddest chick, as they say, on the block. And she was beautiful. And he summoned her to come into his presence so that everybody could see her, but she refused to come. So it embarrassed him and it broke a law, and so he had to sever that relationship and get rid of her. But his heart was not in it. He afterwards was broken because he had been drinking and having fun. But when he came down to reality and he sobered up, he was sorry for what he had done, but he had made a decree, and that was that. So a word went out throughout the land. It was advised to him that what he could do to keep from being so depressed about what he had done was to find a new wife, a new queen, and to go through the virgins of the land to pick out the most beautiful, kind of like a beauty pageant, bring them before the king, and whoever the king liked, that would be his next queen. And so they were brought into the kingdom. Hadassah, or Esther, was one of those young women, young girls, who was taken, not by will, but against their will, but they had to go and be brought before the king's presence and see who would favor him. Now, So she's in this position, and by now, and at the time of my reading of these scriptures, she is the queen. She went in there, and from the time she stepped foot into the palace, she had favor on her life. And she was put into the hands of the king's chamberlain, who, was like the king's right hand butler, the highest butler in the palace. And she had favor with him, and he made sure that when it was her time to go in before the king, that she had the best glam team, everybody, whatever she needed. He knew the king's likes and dislikes, so he made sure that she could present herself in a manner that the king would favor her even and like her, besides her being beautiful and young. So she's queen now. But things had happened in the kingdom. There was a great amount of hatred between one of the king's administrators and Esther's uncle Mordecai. And because that Mordecai didn't give him the respect that he felt he should have, him having the king's ear put out an edict about the Jews, and knowing that since he was a Jew, that he would be able to get rid of him too, with this edict that he could get the king to put out over the land. And he did put this edict out, and Mordecai now is frantic. He's trying to get to Esther because Esther has the king's ear. After all, she's his wife. He's the queen. So he's now sent word to her to say, listen, this is what's going on. And you're in the kingdom, you're in the palace, and you think you'll be safe. But you have to go talk to the king on our behalf and stop this edict about killing the Jews throughout the land. And she says, but listen, you know what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to put my life on the line. You know that there is a law that stands, whether man or woman. If you go before the king, you try to break into his presence without being invited, that you will be killed. Your head will be chopped off immediately. It's not going to go to trial and see about pleading your case. It will happen right then and there if you break into the court. And he says, listen, think about this, Esther. You are now in a position of power and authority where you can actually help your people. You can save your people, from this horrible, really destruction. And you can do something. And don't think that if you pull back, you're going to be safe by this. You're not. Because if you don't do it, help will come from another direction, from some other place that this help will be sent to the people. We're not going to be destroyed. You have an opportunity here to go see the king. You have been placed into a position. Think about it. This is not a coincidence. Who knows whether you have been placed as queen and come into the kingdom for such a time as this? Because when you think about it, all of the other hundreds of young women that the king had one night to spend with to see who he would like, it could be confusing after all those women. But who knows? Listen, you didn't just go in there by yourself. There's something happening here, because this is a strange way for you to get from being poverty to from being poor to all of a sudden being one of the most powerful women in the land, being married to one of the most powerful men in the land. And you're right there. How do you think you got there? There's something working here that you don't understand, that you probably have been placed in this position at this time to save your people. So if you don't speak up now, don't think you're going to be saved. Help will come from someplace else. So in thinking about that, she decided, okay, I'm going to do this, but I want you all to pray and fast for me, so that when I go before the king, that he will receive me. Now, why is the scripture important? Because when I think about all the problems that are in our land today, throughout the world, things that are going on, you have to kind of look at where you are, because everybody has a purpose and a destiny that God has given us. And so I'm thinking about all the problems that there are. There are no problems that cannot be solved, because God has put us here. He has positioned us in different places so that we can help solve many of the problems and the issues and the ills. But we have to have the courage. We have to have the boldness. We have to lend our voice and able to help, not turn our heads, but to see what the problems are and think about what each of us can individually do. Because who knows where we are right now, the positions that we are in. that whether we have been placed here by God so that we can do the Lord's will, so that we can use what he has given us. And you can't think that anything you have is too small or that too insignificant, because everything about you, everything about us is significant, because we were created by the hand of God and he has guided us to this point. So there is a purpose and there is a plan for each of our lives. So we have to look inside ourselves and think about what God could use us to do, what he may be calling us to do, and not think about just individually saving ourselves, because we have the ability, we have the strength, and if we are praying and in God's word, we can get the direction and the enablement to do whatever he is calling for us to do, and to not to shy away from it, and not to be fearful. Because if God is directing you and tugging on your heartstrings to do something, do it. Because if you don't do it, guess what? Help will come from someplace else. That problem that he has given you to solve will be solved even if you don't do it, and you will have missed a great opportunity to do the will of God. So on this week, in this moment in the word, let's remember that what we may be coming across, something you may have seen, something you may have thought about, something that God had already laid on your heart that you've been giving thought to pray about it and ask God. If you're holding back and you know within itself it's just fear holding you back, ask God to give you the courage and the faith to do what God is calling you to do, though it may not be easy. But he has built you for this. If it's not easy, you know he's called you to do it. And you don't have to wait till you get rid of all of your fear. Just continue to have faith and keep taking steps towards what the Lord has called you to do. So on this moment in a Word Monday, I say, go forth this week. Trust in the Lord and see what he's using, what he wants to use you for, and don't miss the opportunity to do whatever the Lord is calling you to do. Don't let fear drown your faith, because God has called you for such a time as this in the kingdom. Have a blessed day and a blessed week. God bless you.